this be one of the best moments of your life. You're listening to the Business Mirror podcast for a broader look on business with Senior Editor Dennis Estopace.
Good day, I'm Dennis Estopace, and our topic for today is climate change. The journalist behind the story titled Cash, Political Will, Coessential Tools versus Catastrophic Impact of Climate Change is Business Mirror's Kai Ordinario. Ms. Ordinario filed the story from Nadi, Fiji during the annual governors meeting of the Asian Development Bank. For the text version of Ms. Ordinario's story, please go to www.businessmirror.com.ph and search for climate change. Ms. Ordinario's story was published on May 9, 2019. Let's get on with the story. The greenback may lead to greening the earth, so some believe. However, for experts at a conference in Nadi, Fiji last May, money is just one of the weapons in this perennial contradiction of man against nature, as nature appears to have the upper hand. At the 52nd Asian Development Bank Annual Governors Meeting on the Pacific island of Fiji, a panel of experts organized by the ADB Independent Evaluation Department raised the urgency in addressing climate change. The experts said Asia and the Pacific has a high exposure to climate change. They said that from the start of the millennium up to 2018, of the 206 million on average affected by weather and other disasters globally each year were from Asia-Pacific. These and other disasters equaled 7% of gross domestic product, or GDP, from the year 2000 to 2018 in Pacific countries, which is far higher than in the sub-regions of Asia, which range from under 1% in East Asia to 6% in South Asia. Among the highly destructive climate-related events were the 2016 Cyclone Winston in Fiji and the 2017 Cyclone Pam in Vanuatu. Cyclone Winston caused estimated losses of 31% of GDP, while Cyclone Pam caused damage equivalent to around 64% of GDP. Based on assessments made by United Nations Environment Program, the Philippines is one of the countries that are most vulnerable to natural disasters. The National Economic and Development Authority said the Philippines incurred nearly 389 billion pesos worth of damage from disasters between the years 2011 and 2018. A 2016 study by the state-owned think tank Philippine Institute for Development Studies, or PIDS, said disasters in the Philippines affected 4 million to 6 million people annually. The PIDS study, entitled Economic Impact of Typhoon Ondoy in Pasig and Marikina cities using a multi-week CGE model analysis, also cited data from the Center for Research in the Epidemiology of Disasters, or CRED, and the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. The data revealed that as of 2012, almost 20,000 people have died, while 2.7 million have been directly affected, and 94 million indirectly affected by natural disasters from 1992 to the year 2011. The study found that the damage caused by extreme flooding in Pasig and Marikina cities due to Tropical Storm Ondoy in 2009 reached nearly 23 billion pesos. About 90% of the amount represented the loss of households and businesses located in Pasig City. The Philippines ranked third overall in the Climate Risk Index and scored 20.2, where the lower CRI score indicates a higher level of exposure and vulnerability to extreme events. Between 1997 and 2016, an average of 860 Filipinos died every year due to extreme weather-related phenomena. This translates to one death for every 100,000 population. The country incurred economic losses worth nearly $3 billion annually. The amount accounted for 0.6% of GDP during the period. According to Finance Undersecretary Mark Dennis Hoven, the government tapped several facilities to address climate change issues. One of these is tapping the government's war chest. Hoven told the Business Mirror that the government spent 198 billion pesos in 2017 and around 278 billion in 2018 for climate change and disaster risk mitigation projects. The government is expected to spend less than 242 billion pesos this year, despite the 2018 being an El Nino year. Majority, or 85% of these funds, are allocated for the Department of Public Works and Highways for projects such as sustainable infrastructure. The government has also tapped the $8 billion Climate Investment Fund, which aims to accelerate climate action by empowering transformations in clean technology, energy access, climate resilience, and sustainable forests in developing and middle-income countries like the Philippines. Based on the Climate Investment Fund website, its large-scale, low-cost, long-term financing lowers the risk and cost of climate financing. It tests new business model, builds track records in unproven markets, and boost investor confidence to unlock additional sources of finance. Of the CIF available, the Philippines was able to tap Clean Technology Funds, or CTF, to finance 6 projects. 5 of these projects were co-financed with the World Bank and 1 from the ADB. Based on its website, the Climate Investment Fund approved nearly $135 million for the Cebu Bus Rapid Transit Project, the Philippines-Manila BRT, the Renewable Energy Accelerator Program, the Renewable Energy Development Project, and the Sustainable Energy Finance Program. These are all implemented with the World Bank. Also approved was the market transformation to introduction of energy-efficient electric vehicles, or the e-trike project, which is being done with the ADB. There is also the Global Environment Facility, or GEF, which extends financing to developing countries and those with economies in transition to meet the objectives of the international environmental conventions and agreements. The GEF support is provided to government agencies, civil society organizations, private sector companies, research institutions, or among the broad diversity of potential partners to implement projects and programs in recipient countries. In the Philippines, the GEF extended grant financing worth nearly $573 million for 111 projects. Through the GEF, the Philippines was also able to gain access to nearly $5 billion worth of the additional co-financing with some GEF agencies, such as the ADB, the World Bank, the Food and Agriculture Organization, the United Nations Development Program, the UN Industrial Development Organizations, and the GEF Secretariat.
Welcome back. You're still listening to the Business Mirror podcast for a broader look on business with Senior Editor Dennis Estopase.
Apart from these, Joven said a host of hybrid facilities are at the Philippines' disposal. One such facility is the parametric insurance, which is funded through a parametric insurance that allows vulnerable local government units to take out insurance for their protection in case disaster strikes. In January, the World Bank, which finances the parametric insurance, said it is extending $390 million in insurance against major typhoon and earthquake events in 25 provinces. Under the program, the World Bank enters into an agreement with private reinsurers to provide coverage against disaster and severe weather impacts for national government agencies and the participating provinces. The renewed policy is facilitated by the World Bank through a catastrophe swap, which provided the Philippine peso equivalent of $206 million in insurance. The panel of risk takers, selected through a competitive bidding process, also doubled under the renewed policy. Risk takers were able to participate in the transaction either through a derivative contract or a retrocession agreement. The Washington-based lender said insurance payouts are made when predefined parametric triggers are met. The Government Service Insurance System, or GSIS, provides the parametric catastrophe insurance coverage. The insurance policy is designed to provide rapid liquidity in the face of disasters to the government to enable rebuilding and recovery to commence. The World Bank is also supporting the Philippines in preparing a sovereign catastrophe bond to complement the existing insurance program by providing cover for more extreme events. Apart from this, there are regional facilities such as the ADB's extension of $5 billion to finance projects on the blue economy, ecosystem management, pollution control, and sustainable infrastructure. Bruce Dunn, Director of the ADB Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department's Safeguard Division, said the funds will be provided using various financing modalities such as lending, grants, and bond floats. Dunn said the funding, which will be extended starting 2019 until 2024, is part of the Action Plan for Healthy Oceans and Sustainable Blue Economies for the Asia and Pacific region. The plan was launched at the 52nd annual meeting of the ADB's Board of Governors in Nadi, Fiji. According to the ADB, the Oceans Financing Initiative will leverage public sector funds to create investment opportunities able to attract financing from a range of sources, which includes the private sector. Technical assistance and funds from ADB and donors, along with innovative financing instruments such as revenue guarantees, credit-enhanced blue bonds, will be used to reduce project risk and make them quote-unquote bankable. The initiative will be piloted in Southeast Asia in collaboration with the ASEAN Infrastructure Fund and the Republic of Korea. The Worldwide Fund for Nature, a longtime partner of ADB, will support the design and implementation of the financing initiative. In the Philippines, the Asian Development Bank will also extend $100 million worth of loans to build sustainable infrastructure, specifically greenways. The amount will finance the construction of between 6 to 7 elevated greenways in congested parts of Metro Manila. Ramesh Subramaniam, the ADB Southeast Asia Director General, recently told reporters that the ADB and the Philippine government intend to complete at least one greenway by 2020. The first 3 locations for the Greenways project will be North EDSA in Quezon City, Pasig City, and Taft Avenue in Manila. The Greenways project is still being evaluated by the National Economic and Development Authority. Subramaniam said the models being used for the greenways are those found in Hong Kong, Kuala Lumpur, and Seoul. He added that the ADB is also looking at Europe-based designs. Subramaniam said completing at least one greenway would also serve as an example on how to do the succeeding greenways that will be built. ADB Southeast Asia Department Deputy Director General F. Cleo Kawawaki explained that the greenways can be used by both pedestrians and cyclists. Kawawaki said the ADB and the government are currently designing a structure to turn this into a reality. Kawawaki said designing the greenways this way will ensure the structures solve 2 problems, which are road congestion and road safety. Traffic along major thoroughfares had cost the economy billions worth of lost economic productivity, while road accidents have increased, Kawawaki noted. On top of these funds, Joven said the private sector also helped shore up climate finance. In February, the ADB announced it invested $20 million in the maiden climate bond issuance of AC Energy Incorporated, a wholly owned subsidiary of Ayala Corp. This public listing is the first climate bond initiative, or CBI-certified US dollar climate bond in Southeast Asia, which is listed on the Singapore Stock Exchange. The ADB is an anchor investor in the 10-year tranche, contributing to a total issue volume of $410 million. Proceeds of the bonds will finance renewable energy projects in the Asia and Pacific region, including Vietnam, the Philippines, and Indonesia. This climate bond will be used to support AC Energy's plan to establish and expand a regional presence in the development of clean energy projects in accordance with environmental best practice.
Welcome back. You're still listening to the Business Mirror podcast. For a broader look on business with Senior Editor Dennis Estopase.
The climate bond is ADB's third and its first publicly listed climate bond. In December 2018, the ADB invested 5 billion Thai baht in B Green Power Public Company Limited's maiden 5-year and 7-year climate bonds. These are Thailand's first certified climate bonds. In 2016, the ADB also extended the guarantee to support an issuance for the TV and Macbanjo thermal power projects, the first climate bond in Asia. This investment is in line with the ADB's new Strategy 2030, which mandates that at least 75% of the number of ADB's committed operations support climate change mitigation and adaptation by 2030. Climate finance from its own resources would be reaching $80 billion from this year to 2030. Joven told the Business Mirror, actually there are a lot of facilities for climate financing, not only at the General Appropriations Act level, but also at the international or multilateral level. Joven added, so I guess the idea is to come up with bankable projects and match these with the funding source. If there are other global and regional funds that are being tapped by the Philippines, the Finance Department said they still have no knowledge about them, given that these projects are not yet mature. The Department of Finance said these agencies are coming up with their own projects, but are encountering challenges such as administrative ones, like lag times. This, however, doesn't mean there are no climate financing options available for countries like the Philippines. Joven said that the biggest challenge is really for climate change and disaster risk projects to deal with several departments and agencies. So, determining who the lead is for a particular project, that's a challenge, Joven added. Efforts to improve the situation are being worked on, especially given that interest payments, especially those considered the most vulnerable to climate change, called the Vulnerable Group of 20 or V20, are finding it difficult to keep up with their financial obligations to address their climate change-related needs. The Philippines is a member of the V20. In a recent study, the United Nations Environment Program said climate change is costing the V20 an additional $62 billion in interest payments alone. This includes $40 billion in additional interest payments on government debt paid over the past decade. Based on their model, it is estimated that the incremental debt cost for the V20 countries was almost $9 billion in 2016 alone. The report said countries with the higher degrees of climate vulnerability face higher sovereign borrowing costs. Finance ministers from the V20 group recently announced new financial instruments in collaboration with international partners at the spring meeting of the World Bank Group and the International Monetary Fund to ensure continued global economic growth in the face of increasing threats from climate change. The group aims to lower the cost of capital and unlock large capital inflows to climate-proof the economic development of at least 1 billion people living in some of the fastest-growing regions who are exposed to severe climate impacts. The V20 has proposed the accelerated financing mechanism for maximal resilience and 100% renewable energy transition to upscale existing risk mitigation tools, guarantees, and blended finance facilities, and a new menu of instruments within multilateral development banks and other development banks for adaptation, resilience, and renewable energy projects. Another V20 instrument, the Sustainable Insurance Facility, intends to promote private sector insurance uptake to address climate risk and promote low-carbon development. The V20 sees the Sustainable Insurance Facility as a tool that can crowd in investments in risk reduction, enhance credit access, and better manage public contingent liabilities related to infrastructure and social resilience. According to Joven, the government considers this as a priority because the Philippines is a member of the V20. All these funds are important in responding to the needs of those affected by disasters. However, Renato Constantino, the executive director of the Institute for Climate and Sustainable Cities, said there is much more to climate finance than disaster response. Constantino told the Business Mirror that the challenges when it comes to climate finance are multidimensional. Coessential said this compels governments to look into various permutations in terms of financing that address not only disaster finance but mitigation and adaptation needs. According to Coessential, disaster response is not the end-all and be-all of climate finance. Unfortunately, many countries, including the Philippines, spend more on disaster response rather than mitigating or adapting to climate change. However, Constantino noted that the administration of President Duterte has been very responsive to the need to address environmental concerns, more so than the previous administration. Constantino said the efforts to clean up Boracay and Manila Bay are the top of the list as well as efforts to address mining concerns. He added that the government's efforts in terms of taxation, which is the implementation of a higher carbon tax, is commendable and certainly needed at this time given the commitments to keep global temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas Governor Benjamin Diokno agrees with Constantino, saying President Duterte has been very consistent about environmental issues. This did not only begin when he became president but was actually part of his campaign promises, the governor said. The BSP governor added, this only shows the kind of political will that this administration has. The 6-month closure of Boracay, the country's top tourist destination, was a testament to this political will, according to Diokno. Tourism Secretary Bernadette Romulo Puyat said the country lost around 500,000 tourists due to the closure of Boracay in 2018. And we plan to fix other tourist destinations. We are very active on the Green program, Diokno told the Business Mirror. We are financing green investment in all cities. That's in the budget. In fact, we can use that to tap into a green fund. According to Diokno, who is the chairman of the Monetary Board, the government should be more active. He added that the president is really concerned with the environment, especially against the abuse of natural resources.
Welcome back. You're still listening to the Business Mirror podcast. For a broader look on business with Senior Editor Dennis Estopase.
Constantino said there is a serious lack of planning when it comes to climate financing. He explained that should funds be available at the speed and quantity that is needed, there is no clear long-term plan available that will help channel these investments into concrete projects leading to climate change mitigation and adaptation. The horizon by which policymakers peg their planning efforts and policies is contingent upon human timelines, not geologic, Constantino said. He added that the catastrophes that countries are experiencing today are a result of the failure of governments to address emissions 3 or 4 decades ago. According to Constantino, if money flows tomorrow on the scale and speed that you'd like, it will probably get stolen or dissipated or wasted because you don't have plans that go beyond 6 years. And that's too short term when it comes to climate realities. Constantino told the Business Mirror, you need to have plans that see over several planning cycles, maybe at least 3 planning cycles or 18 years because the impacts are not short term. Further, Constantino said it is important to consider slow onset impacts. Slow onset impacts, Constantino explained, take place without the drama of a calamity. Constantino further explains that disasters are episodic in nature, and as such, governments and multilateral development banks are more familiar with them. For instance, the onslaught of Super Typhoon Yolanda cannot be ignored given the scale of the catastrophe in economic terms and in loss of human life. While there is no destroyed infrastructure to repair and dead bodies to count, slow onset impacts have the capacity to change the face of the planet, according to Constantino. Constantino added that these include rising sea levels that occur over long periods of time. The changes are as minute as paint peeling off of walls. Given this reality and the fact that the Philippines is embarking on massive reclamation projects, Constantino said this is simply worrisome. 2019, he said, is the 10th anniversary of Typhoon Ondoy. 2018 was the 5th anniversary of Yolanda, and you can say Pablo, Sendong, and all of that. Constantino said those are extreme weather events that are likely traceable to emissions that we failed to prevent 30 years ago. So, what for us is history is still current affairs for Mother Nature, Constantino said. This is all linked toward a slower pace that is more attuned to nature. Constantino said the government, particularly the BSP, should also evaluate how it considers climate finance. He said monetary authorities should take time to examine the efforts of commercial banks that finance environmentally harmful projects. In a study by the Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis and the Institute for Climate and Sustainable Cities, stranded coal asset cost is already being realized in Mindanao due to an oversupply of approximately 700 megawatts of coal and hydro. The study found that between 2014 and 2016, stranded costs were conservatively equivalent to 3 billion pesos or $60 million. This risk is not always taken into consideration by banks, the study said. The study added that the stranded asset risk across coal-fired electricity generation sector is rising and is driven by an overbuild of coal-fired plants as well as a trend toward falling power prices. This is driven by the deflationary nature of renewables and accelerating policies on retail competition. These trends, the study stated, may leave ratepayers at risk of having to pay above market prices and may affect the ability to service debt and return prospects of the equity investor. Jokno, however, told the Business Mirror that it is not within the BSP's powers to direct lending. For survivors like Janine Marie Soliman, the cause of climate change is very personal. A decade ago, Soliman saw how water became deadly and dangerous when it inundated the second story of the newly built house of her grandparents in Provident Village, Marikina. Her grandfather, injured by broken glass, stayed with them at their neighbor's roof for 12 long hours. Soliman and her twin sister fell ill with leptospirosis, forcing them to a 2-week hospital stay. Apart from their medical expenses, the cost to repair the damage to their new home came at a lofty price of 450,000 pesos. Also, the financial and psychological costs were staggering. Still, Soliman considers herself lucky that despite the many deaths caused by Typhoon Ondoy, she and her family survived the tragedy and still live to tell the tale. Her family has also upgraded their insurance coverage to include Acts of God. That move is recommended by a PIDS study which said that apart from the government effort, households must also gear their loins when it comes to securing the future in the climate change era. The PIDS study noted that city residents are willing to invest billions to reduce their exposure and vulnerability to adverse effects of extreme flooding. The PIDS study estimated that residents in Pasig City may be willing to pay up to 13 billion pesos for protection against the adverse effects of natural disasters such as Typhoon Ondoy. Marikina City residents, on the other hand, may have to pay a lot less for the same purpose, around 2 billion pesos, according to the PIDS study. According to the PIDS study, rather than merely undertaking relief programs following a natural disaster, investing by local authorities in making the city less vulnerable to climate change shocks promises good returns.
Thank you for listening to the Business Mirror podcast. For a broader look on business, follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Business Mirror. Until next time.